The champagne had barely dried on coffee tables across Michigan when the call came in. January 1st, 2018, a day meant for fresh starts and new beginnings. Instead, it became the day that would haunt every first responder who walked through that trailer door in Summer Township. What they found inside defied every instinct of human decency, every assumption about how adults should protect children. A 4-year-old girl named Gabby Barrett lay motionless on a bathroom floor, her small body bearing wounds so severe that seasoned investigators would struggle to find words. Her skin had literally melted into the bathtub drain. The medical examiner, a man who had seen 27 years of death in all its forms, would later call it the worst child death case of his entire career. But this story isn't just about one horrific moment. It's about a system of cruelty that built slowly, methodically, behind the closed doors of a mobile home where privacy became a weapon and isolation became a death sentence. It's about how two adults could systematically destroy a child's spirit, body, and hope while the world remained obliviously unaware. This is the true story of Gabby Barrett, a little girl who loved hugs, who found joy at school, who deserved protection but received only betrayal from those meant to love her most. Her story will shake you, anger you, and ultimately show you that sometimes justice does prevail, even when it comes too late for the innocent. Sumner Township sits just 30 miles from Detroit, close enough to feel the pulse of the city, but far enough away to maintain the quiet desperation of rural America. In 2018, it was home to fewer than 10,000 residents, most living paycheck to paycheck in a community still reeling from economic recession. The mobile home parks that dotted the landscape offered affordable housing, but also dangerous isolation, places where a child's cries might go unheard, where neighbors minded their own business, even when they shouldn't have. It was in one such trailer that evil took root and flourished, hidden behind the thin walls that separated public face from private horror. The warning signs had been there for anyone willing to see them. 2 years before Gabby's death, police had already been called to that same address for domestic violence. What they found should have set off every alarm bell in the child protection system. A filthy residence reeking of decay, flies buzzing through rooms where children were supposed to sleep, dog waste coating bedroom floors, and weapons scattered among the squalor. But bureaucracy moved slowly, and Gabby paid the ultimate price for those delays. Gabrielle Renia Barrett entered the world in July 2013, a healthy baby girl born to Candace Diaz and Thomas Barrett. Those early photographs tell a different story than what would come later. A chubby-cheeked infant surrounded by family, a toddler who smiled easily and hugged freely. Teachers at her preschool would remember Gabby as unusually affectionate, a child who formed quick bonds with adults and seemed to crave connection with a desperate intensity that should have raised questions. School was her escape from reality. Prosecutor Bruce Elsey would later tell the court. It was the only place where Gabby felt safe, where she could be a normal 4-year-old without fear of the violence that awaited her at home. Her parents' relationship fractured when she was barely 6 months old. Thomas Barrett moved out, but maintained he wanted to stay involved in his daughter's life. Financial struggles complicated his efforts. Court records show he owed over $2,600 in back child support, a debt that grew as he struggled with unemployment and homelessness. "I got to give her a kiss and a hug and say I loved her," he would later tell reporters, describing his final visit with Gabby in September 2017, just months before her death. That memory would have to sustain him through a lifetime of regret. To understand Gabby's fate, you must first understand her mother's demons. Candace Diaz carried trauma that stretched back to her own childhood. At age 4, the same age Gabby would be when she died, Candace had survived a devastating house fire that left burns covering 50% of her body. Court documents reveal that her grandmother had fled the burning home, leaving the child behind to face the flames alone. That abandonment, coupled with physical scars and untreated psychological wounds, shaped every relationship Candace would form thereafter. Her parents were later charged with criminal abuse and sentenced to prison, after which Candace was placed with adoptive parents. But the damage had been done. Without proper treatment, She developed bipolar disorder, PTSD, depression, and anxiety, a constellation of mental health conditions she would later admit to leaving completely untreated. Trauma has a way of passing from generation to generation, seeking out new victims with ruthless precision. For Gabby Barrett, her mother's unhealed wounds would become the source of her own destruction. Within months of separating from Thomas Barrett, Candace began a relationship with 28-year-old Brad Edward Fields. The speed with which he moved into her life should have been a red flag. Abusers rarely waste time establishing control. Fields brought with him a documented history of violence against women, a pattern of intimidation and manipulation that neighbors would soon witness firsthand. Both adults suffered from severe, untreated mental illnesses, creating a volatile cocktail of instability within the home. While Candace battled her childhood trauma, Fields claimed to suffer from schizoaffective disorder, social anxiety, agoraphobia, and PTSD. Rather than seeking treatment, they self-medicated with drugs. Police would later find cocaine throughout the residence. The dynamic shifted dramatically when Candace gave birth to Fields' daughter, Zoe. Suddenly, there were 2 children in the home, but only one was considered family. The difference in how they were treated became stark and unmistakable. Judge Vonda Evans would later observe this cruel distinction during sentencing. He, with your aid, killed your child and spared Zoe. Zoe was never at risk of harm because you wanted to get rid of the problem, and that was Gabby. This favoritism was even reflected in family photographs. On New Year's Eve 2017, the very night Gabby lay dying from catastrophic burns, the couple sent out holiday cards featuring themselves with baby Zoe. Gabby was conspicuously absent from the family portrait, symbolically erased even before her physical death. As Judge Evans would later note with chilling accuracy, "Happy New Year," the card read, but the person that was missing was Gabby because you knew that Gabby wasn't going to make it another year. In the twisted logic of their household, Fields saw Gabby as an unwelcome reminder of Candace's past, an obstacle to his vision of their new family. Judge Evans would make a disturbing but apt comparison during sentencing. In nature, male lions kill cubs that aren't their own and breed with the female. That was the logic practiced in their home. September 2017 marked the beginning of the end for Gabby Barrett. That fall, she was enrolled in preschool and forced to move into her mother's trailer full-time, no longer able to find refuge with her grandmother. What happened next was a systematic campaign of torture disguised as discipline, a methodical destruction of a child's spirit that defied every instinct of human decency. Text messages recovered from the couple's phones revealed the horrifying dynamic that had developed. Fields bragged about beating Gabby, while Candace not only failed to intervene, but actively encouraged the abuse. "Give her a good beating," she texted Fields regarding her own daughter. Words that would haunt the courtroom and demonstrate how completely the protective bond between mother and child had been severed. The punishments inflicted on Gabby defied comprehension. She was sentenced to sleep in an empty room as punishment for normal childhood behaviors. When she wet her bed, a common response to trauma in young children, she was forced to use a black garbage bag for warmth. Fields threatened to drown her in his own urine if her bathroom accidents continued. Threats that prosecutors would prove were far from empty. Evidence showed that Gabby was regularly beaten for interrupting Fields' video game sessions, for crying, for simply existing in a space where she wasn't wanted. Her diet was severely restricted, leading to rapid weight loss and malnutrition. By age 4, all of her teeth had rotted completely, a clear sign of neglect that would have caused constant, excruciating pain. Perhaps most disturbing was how the couple administered drugs to keep Gabby compliant during abuse sessions. This wasn't medical care. It was chemical restraint designed to make their torture more convenient. Within those trailer walls, Gabby existed in a world where every day brought new horrors, where the adults meant to protect her competed to devise more creative forms of cruelty. As 2017 drew to a close, Gabby's situation had become desperate. Photographs from this period show a gaunt, hollow-eyed child bearing little resemblance to the smiling toddler from earlier pictures. Her hair was falling out from stress and malnutrition, her body covered in bruises in various stages of healing. She had been systematically broken down, physically and emotionally, by two adults who found pleasure in her pain. New Year's Eve, 2017, began like any other day of torment for Gabby Barrett. While families across America prepared to celebrate the promise of a new year, the 4-year-old faced what would be her final night of suffering. According to Candace's later statement to police, Gabby had somehow drawn her own bath that evening, making the water so hot that she burned herself. This claim, that a malnourished, abused 4-year-old with severe dental pain had managed to draw a bath hot enough to cause catastrophic burns, defied both medical and practical logic. Forensic experts would determine that the temperature required to cause such severe injuries would have necessitated deliberately overriding safety features on the water heater. These were immersion burns, the kind that result from being forcibly held in scalding water, not from accidentally stepping into a hot tub. The pain would have been beyond description, the kind of agony that would drive any normal parent to immediate emergency action. Yet no help was called. No trip to the hospital. No call to 911. Instead, the gravely injured child was put to bed, left to suffer through the night with third-degree burns covering significant portions of her small body. New Year's Day, 2018 dawned with Gabby in unimaginable pain. The burns had begun to blister and weep, creating open wounds vulnerable to infection. Rather than finally seeking medical attention, what happened next revealed the depths of depravity to which her tormentors had sunk. According to court testimony, Candace forced Gabby into another scalding bath that morning. With her skin already damaged and raw from the previous night's burns, this second immersion proved catastrophic. The mother claimed she filled the tub halfway and placed Gabby inside before leaving to make pancakes in the kitchen, an act of callous indifference that sealed the child's fate. When Candace claimed to have returned, she found Gabby submerged to her nose, vomit streaming from her mouth as her small body went into shock. Only then did she call for Fields to help, and even then, their priorities were telling. According to phone records, they noticed Gabby's critical condition at 10:05 a.m., yet didn't call 911 until 10:41 a.m., a 36-minute delay that prosecutors argued demonstrated their callous disregard for the dying child. Those crucial minutes weren't spent providing first aid or comfort. Instead, evidence suggests Fields was busy destroying evidence, literally peeling burned skin from Gabby's body and stuffing it down the drain in a desperate attempt to cover their tracks. When first responders finally arrived, they found Gabby unresponsive on the bathroom floor, her airways filled with vomit, her body shutting down from septic shock. The burns were so severe that her skin had melted into the bathtub drain. Her big toe had completely detached from her foot. Medical examiners would determine that Gabby died from massive infection that spread from her untreated burns throughout her small body, overwhelming her immune system and shutting down her vital organs. On the first day of 2018, while families across the nation celebrated fresh starts and new possibilities, Gabby Barrett's tortured existence finally came to an end on the cold bathroom floor of a trailer home. As Judge Evans would later observe, her little body couldn't take any more abuse, and on New Year's Day, she was free. She died at the hands of a bum and an animal. The crime scene that first responders encountered would haunt them for the rest of their careers. Officer Gilbert, one of the first on scene, later testified about finding Gabby on the bathroom floor with her eyes open and glazed, showing no signs of life despite ongoing CPR attempts. "I noticed scalding and bruising all over her body," he recounted in his report, though the full extent of her injuries wouldn't become clear until the medical examiner's investigation. Crime scene technicians processing the bathroom made discoveries that contradicted every aspect of Candace's story. In the bathtub drain, they found what detectives described as a large amount of melted skin, physical evidence of the extreme temperatures Gabby had been subjected to. The forensic evidence painted a picture not of accidental injury, but of deliberate torture. The Washtenaw County medical examiner's findings revealed the full scope of Gabby's suffering. Beyond the catastrophic burns that ultimately killed her, her body showed evidence of systematic, long-term abuse. Bruises in various stages of healing suggested repeated beatings over weeks or months. Signs of malnutrition indicated deliberate food deprivation. Traumatic alopecia showed that hair had been forcibly pulled from her scalp while she was alive. Perhaps most heartbreaking was the discovery of vomit in her lungs, indicating that Gabby had aspirated during her final moments, a detail that suggested she died choking on her own fluids, alone and in agony. The official cause of death was septic shock, her small body overwhelmed by infection from the untreated burns. What made the case even more disturbing was evidence of attempted cover-up. Forensic analysis suggested that Fields had methodically tried to destroy evidence of their crimes, peeling burned skin from Gabby's body and placing it in the drain. When he went to hide the evidence, Judge Evans would later state during sentencing, he peeled burned skin off her body and placed it in a drain. The investigation revealed other signs of ongoing neglect that painted a picture of systematic cruelty. Medical records showed Gabby had received virtually no health care throughout her life. Her complete dental decay would have caused constant pain and made eating difficult. Cell phones seized from the home contained text messages between the couple discussing beating Gabby, confirming that both adults were not only aware of the abuse, but actively encouraged it. For investigators with decades of experience, the Gabby Barrett case represented something beyond their worst nightmares. The deliberate, sustained cruelty inflicted on such a young child challenged their fundamental assumptions about human nature. Yet their professional duty demanded they document every detail, preserve every piece of evidence, and build the strongest possible case to ensure justice for a little girl who could no longer speak for herself. As detectives processed the horrific crime scene, they quickly realized that Candace Diaz and Brad Fields had vanished. The couple had fled sometime after Gabby's death, abandoning the trailer and leaving behind the scene of their brutality. Within hours, authorities issued arrest warrants charging both with felony murder, second-degree murder, first-degree child abuse, and torture. The U.S. Marshal Service joined the manhunt, elevating the case to national priority as details of Gabby's suffering began emerging in press reports. We knew they had a significant head start, Deputy U.S. Marshal Robert Watson later told reporters, but we also knew they would eventually make mistakes. The first breakthrough came through financial tracking. Debit card activity on Diaz's account showed purchases at gas stations heading south on Interstate 75. The couple was clearly making a run for Florida, likely hoping to disappear among tourists and transients where strangers wouldn't raise suspicion. What the fugitives didn't realize was that modern technology made true disappearance nearly impossible. Every time they powered on their cell phones, they created digital breadcrumbs for authorities to follow. Cell tower pings tracked their movement across state lines, from Michigan through Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, and into Georgia. They would periodically turn on their cell phone to use it, Sheriff Dale Malone later explained to reporters. This allowed investigators to ping their location. For 8 days, the couple remained on the run while the nation's attention focused on their capture. News outlets broadcast their photos nationwide, and tips began flowing into the Marshal's tip line from viewers who recognized the fugitives. On January 9, 2018, their desperate flight finally ended near Lake Park, Georgia, just miles from the Florida state line. A routine traffic stop by local police, who had been alerted to watch for the couple's vehicle, brought the nationwide manhunt to a conclusion. Law enforcement dash cam footage captured the moment of their arrest. Unlike Gabby's final moments of terror and agony, Diaz and Fields surrendered without incident, offering no resistance as officers placed them in handcuffs. The contrast was striking. The gentle handling of two adults accused of unimaginable cruelty toward a child. Neither asked about Gabby during their arrest. Neither showed any visible remorse for what they had done. As they were led to separate patrol cars, their faces showed not grief or regret, but the vacant expression of predators finally caught. Their 8-day flight had covered nearly 800 miles, but there was no escape from the evidence they had left behind, no running from the truth of what they had done to an innocent child. Justice moved slowly, but it was finally in motion. In January 2018, Candace Diaz and Brad Fields were extradited from Georgia back to Michigan to face the full weight of the law. The Wayne County Prosecutor's Office filed the most serious charges available: felony murder, second-degree murder, torture, and first-degree child abuse. Fields faced additional conspiracy charges for his role in the attempted cover-up. Their cases proceeded separately through the system, with Fields choosing to fight the charges at trial while evidence mounted against him like an avalanche. In court, prosecutors methodically presented the text messages between the couple, the forensic evidence from the crime scene, and medical testimony that painted a horrifying picture of Gabby's final months. The jury didn't need long to reach their verdict. After deliberating for just 4 hours in October 2018, they convicted Brad Fields on all counts, including first-degree felony murder, a verdict that carried a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. The man who had terrorized a 4-year-old girl would never again walk free. At Fields' sentencing hearing, Wayne County Circuit Judge Vonda Evans delivered one of her most powerful condemnations. Known throughout Michigan for her unflinching courtroom statements, Evans didn't hold back her disgust for the man before her. In 21 years on the bench, I have never seen a child sustain the injuries that Gabby Barrett sustained, she declared, her voice carrying the weight of 2 decades of difficult cases. She described Fields as a terrible king who ruled Gabby's home through violence and intimidation, creating an atmosphere of fear that permeated every corner of the child's existence. "Brad, you're a murderer," Judge Evans stated with unwavering conviction. Her only escape was school, which she loved, but by night she was tortured and humiliated. In a particularly poignant moment, the judge compared the family's home to the castle in Beauty and the Beast, but noted one crucial difference. Even in Beauty and the Beast had a good heart. "Brad, you're a murderer." The judge sentenced Fields to natural life in prison, ensuring that barring a successful appeal, unlikely given the overwhelming evidence, he would die behind bars, never again free to harm another child. Meanwhile, facing the same damning evidence, Candace Diaz chose a different path. In September 2018, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and first-degree child abuse in exchange for prosecutors dropping the torture and first-degree murder charges. It was a plea deal that acknowledged her cooperation while still holding her accountable for her central role in her daughter's death. At her December 2018 sentencing, Judge Evans was equally direct with a mother who had not only failed to protect her child, but had actively participated in her destruction. "Your beautiful daughter Gabby was a sacrifice you gave that bum Brad to fulfill his sick and demonic sense of love and control," Evans told Diaz. "You and that monster systematically destroyed this beautiful child's spirit, body, but never her soul." Judge Evans sentenced Diaz to 30 to 60 years in prison, a term that means she will be in her mid-50s before even becoming eligible for parole consideration. More importantly, it ensures that she will spend the majority of her remaining life behind bars, paying for her betrayal of the most fundamental duty of motherhood. While the legal system had delivered its verdict, no punishment could undo the damage done to Gabby Barrett. As one prosecutor noted after the sentencing, the system can remove dangerous individuals from society and provide a measure of justice, but cannot heal the wounds inflicted on a child who needed protection but received only cruelty from those meant to love her most. Yet in its own way, justice had been served. 2 predators who had tortured an innocent child were now caged forever, their ability to harm others permanently stripped away. For Gabby Barrett, who had endured so much pain in her short life, her tormentors would never again know freedom. While the legal system delivered its verdict, the courtroom on sentencing day told a different story about who Gabby Barrett truly was. More than a dozen family members filled the wooden benches, bearing witness for the little girl who could no longer speak for herself. In their hands, they carried a hardcover photo book they had lovingly created titled My Little Princess, pages filled with images of Gabby in happier times, smiling and playing, capturing moments of pure childhood joy that were all too brief in her tragically short life. Stephanie Barrett, Gabby's aunt, delivered a victim impact statement that laid bare the family's ongoing anguish. Standing before the court with quiet dignity, she spoke directly to the defendants who had destroyed their family's future. "Every day we live in pain," she told the packed courtroom, her voice breaking with emotion, wondering why she was murdered. Facing Diaz and Fields directly, she expressed what everyone in the room felt but couldn't articulate. "That beautiful soul. We don't get to see it anymore because of them." For Thomas Barrett, Gabby's father, the pain was compounded by overwhelming regret and the cruel timing of loss. Having been released from jail just 2 days after his daughter's death, he learned of her murder while still trying to rebuild his own troubled life. The memory that would have to sustain him through a lifetime of grief was simple but profound. "I got to give her a kiss and a hug and say, I loved her," he told reporters about their final meeting in September 2017, just months before her death. That moment of normal parental affection, a kiss, a hug, words of love, represented everything Gabby had been denied in her final months. It was a reminder of who she could have been, who she deserved to be, if evil hadn't found its way into her world. Meanwhile, one small mercy emerged from his tragic case. Zoe, Gabby's half-sister and the biological daughter of Fields and Diaz, was immediately removed from her parents' custody after Gabby's death. The Michigan Department of Health and Human Services filed an emergency petition, citing the cocaine found in the home, and both parents admitted untreated mental health conditions. Unlike her sister, Zoe would have a chance at a normal life, placed in protective custody away from the violence that had consumed Gabby. It was a bittersweet reminder that while justice came too late for one child, it arrived just in time to save another. The family's photo book, My Little Princess, became more than just a collection of memories. It was evidence of who Gabby Barrett truly was beyond the horror of her final months. Here was a child who had loved freely, who had found joy in simple pleasures, who had deserved protection and received only betrayal. The smiling face in those photographs represented not just a life lost, but a future stolen, dreams that would never be realized, and love that would never be returned. As family members left the courthouse that day, they carried with them the knowledge that justice had been served, that Gabby's tormentors would never again be free to harm another child. It wasn't the outcome they had prayed for. Nothing could bring back their little princess, but it was closure, a final chapter in a story that had begun with such promise and ended in such tragedy. Today, Brad Fields sits in a Michigan prison cell where he will remain until he draws his last breath. There will be no parole hearings, no second chances, no return to society. He is 34 years old, and every single day for the rest of his life, he will wake up behind bars, paying for the cruelty he inflicted on an innocent child. Candace Diaz, now 32, faces the same concrete walls and steel bars that will define her existence until at least her mid-50s, assuming she lives long enough to see her first parole hearing. For a woman who chose her abusive boyfriend over her own daughter's life, this extended separation from society represents the price of her betrayal. The trailer in Summer Township where Gabby Barrett died has been demolished, the physical structure of horror erased from the landscape. But the memory of what happened within those thin walls lives on in court records, in the testimony of investigators who will never forget what they saw, and the hearts of a family still grieving their little princess. In the years since the conviction, both defendants have maintained their incarceration without significant incident. There have been no successful appeals, no dramatic reversals of fortune. The evidence against them was simply too overwhelming, the testimony too compelling, the forensic proof too damning to overcome. Child Protection Services in Michigan have implemented new protocols partly inspired by the failures that allowed Gabby's abuse to escalate unchecked. While no system is perfect, the hope is that future children in similar situations might be identified and rescued before tragedy strikes. Perhaps most importantly, Gabby Barrett's story serves as a reminder that evil often hides behind the most mundane facades. In mobile home parks and suburban neighborhoods, in families that appear normal from the outside but harbor unspeakable darkness within. Her death was not in vain if it helps others recognize the warning signs and take action before another child suffers as she did. The 4-year-old girl who loved school, who hugged her classmates freely, who sought connection even in the midst of her torment, became more than a victim through the justice delivered in her name. She became a symbol of innocence protected, of evil punished, of a system that sometimes works exactly as it should. Justice was served for Gabby Barrett. Not the justice that could bring her back or undo her suffering, but the justice that ensures her tormentors will never again be free to harm another child. In a world where such complete accountability is often elusive, her case stands as proof that sometimes, when the evidence is clear and the system works properly, predators face the full consequences of their actions. Brad Fields will die in prison. Candace Diaz will spend the best years of her remaining life behind bars. And Gabby Barrett, whose short life was defined by unimaginable pain, finally has peace and justice. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. If you haven't already, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We upload new true crime content daily, covering cases you know and many you don't. Stick with us as we bring you more stories that deserve to be heard. See you in the next video.